Good morning. I'm Mirabai. I'm Cedar's sister and beekeeper. Usually I'm the Flow Hive filmmaker and I'm behind the camera, so forgive me if I'm a bit awkward. This is Trace, our office chief.
Hello.
And this morning we're going to check on actually Jess's hive, our marketing manager's hive, to see, it's been 3 weeks since we had a look and we found a new queen. They'd gone queenless and they managed to make a new queen. First things first, safety. Trace is all ready to go. I am not. It's really important to wear safety bee suits, whatever is appropriate for you. I'm quite an experienced beekeeper now. I used to always wear gloves, but I will just wear more easily and cause less disturbance without wearing gloves. But I do have them here, so I'm always being quite aware if I hear the bees getting grumpy. But some people are severely allergic, so please take care of yourself. Trace, do you want to give the hive a bit of a smoke?
Yep, I'll give it a little cup.
I might come around here.
Out the front, okay?
Yeah, a few puffs of cool smoke in the front of the hive and maybe just a little puff at the back there through the screen bottom board. And when I lift this off, I'll get you to give one more puff in the top there.
Yep.
So we don't have a plug covering the hole in the inner cover. You can do that to stop them getting up there, but they're not a very strong hive yet, so they haven't built any burr comb in the roof. So I'm just going to pop this roof over here, and then I might swap sides with you.
Okay.
And we're just going to use our hive tool to, thanks Trace, lever off the edge. Now it doesn't feel all that stuck. The bees use Propolis to propolize up the edges and stop any airflow getting in.
Look at them, they're so calm.
They are. So with a brood box like this, where you don't have a flow super, it is always useful to just make sure that your queen is not gone on a little expedition onto the inner cover. Because if we put that down on the ground and the queen gets left outside of the hive, she's too large to fly when she's in mating. When she's in laying mode, and she will not make it back. So I'm going to put this at the front. Just lean it up against the entrance, so actually the bees that are on there can crawl back into the hive and not end up on the ground. That's just something I like to do. Again, you know, every beekeeper has their own opinions about how they like to beekeep, so you just kind of work out what works for you eventually. And of course, as beekeepers, we're always learning. So Cedar, my brother's my mentor, and I often find things in the hive and I run to him and ask. And likewise, you know, I'm here with Trace, who's new to beekeeping. So we're like, it's that lovely exchange of knowledge. So if you look at this stone, we've got stone behind the camera today. We actually thought this hive was queenless, and so we added a frame of brood from another hive to give them another chance to make a queen. But actually in that process, they had already made a new queen with the previous queen's eggs, but we just didn't realise. But it didn't harm them to add that frame of brood because it gave them a little boost in numbers. But you can see that frame's an older frame and it came from a different hive. It's a bit more waxed up.
So will you clean all that off before?
Yeah, different beekeepers have different thoughts about cleaning that burr comb. What does happen is it kind of glues everything together on the roof and makes it a bit harder to open. So yeah, I'd certainly come in here and just gently clean that off. Maybe a puff of smoke to get the bees out of the way.
Come on. Oh, hear the sound change.
Yeah, it's funny, it's smoke, I guess, but it's like the buzz increases and then it lowers again when they kind of drop down into the hive and tend to relax a bit. There's different theories about what the smoke is doing in terms of masking the alarm pheromone, but also calming the bees down. Or some people say that they're trying to eat honey, preparing to leave the hive almost, so they're busy doing other things. So basically we just want to check and see. Last time we were in here, we saw the queen and we saw her laying eggs. And we just want to check that that's, you know, she's on track and everything's going well. Yep. So I'm just putting my hive tool in to break the propolis and going left to right. So just sideways like that.
Any reason for that?
Because it's really sticky, this propolis. I can't really lift that frame very easily out. just by kind of levering it. So if we go side to side, we also break any like bridging comb that might be there, and also create a little bit more space so that when we pull out this frame, we're not rolling bees between frames, because that can kill bees or kill your queen even if she was happened to be on this frame. But I've chosen this one in from the edge. Often this one has quite a bit of brace comb onto the edge. So usually for me, I would always start one in from the edge.
Yep.
And then we'll just gently pull this up. And always with that first one, it's like before you have a bit of room to move, it's important just to go slowly, carefully, so that you don't squash any bees. Wow, it's full of honey in there. And so we're using foundationless in our brood boxes, so we let the bees draw their natural comb. And you have to be careful with this not to tip it on its side. So if I'm looking at this side and I want to look at the other side, I turn it away from me and I spin it on its axis and then look on this side. And actually there's a queen cup on this side. You see that, Trace?
Yeah,
and a little patch of brood.
Is that the little queen cup there?
Yep.
And is that why then they haven't built the comb, but like it's how they haven't joined it? Or
Yeah, yeah, they generally will do the queen cups on the edges of frames. That one, again, let me just put my hive tool down. That one's empty, so I just looked in it and it's empty.
Oh.
Queen cups, like my understanding is that, like that one is just a sort of just in case cup.
Okay.
It doesn't have an egg in it, so they're not growing a new queen.
Did you see that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when I
Right.
turned it up the other way, if you look
gotcha.
down in there,
Yep.
you can see that there's actually
There's
nothing in there.
Yep.
So I wouldn't worry too much about that one. That could be just a backup, like an emergency
Yep.
cup, just in case something goes up with the queen. And this is mostly honey, but you can see a little bit of worker brood there.
Yep.
And I don't see any drones on that frame. Maybe I'll pass that to you,
Yep.
if you're okay
Yep.
with that. And I might also just grab a little bit more smoke, because you can hear the bees. A couple of bees are buzzing at me. So I'm just going to give them a little bit more smoke to calm them down a bit more. And if you guys have questions, you're welcome to ask. And if I know the answer, I'll answer. If I don't, I'll get someone else on the Awesome Flow team to help out as well. So, what have we got, Trace?
Oh, look at all the brood on that one.
Yeah, this has got beautiful brood on this side as well.
Oh, same.
So,
How long have these bees been in here for?
So, I mean, it's really just been 3 weeks now, or maybe
Wow.
3.5 since they've been laying again. So they had the colony was doing well. It's probably a few months old, I think. And then they lost their queen. Something happened and the queen died, and they had to make a new one. So there's always a break in the brood when that happens. So, and the numbers were really quite reduced. So we checked on this hive and we were like, oh, there's no brood, no cap brood. Something's wrong.
Yep.
Luckily, that time we found the queen.
Yes.
And she just started to lay. So that was 3 weeks ago. So she was probably laying all these just then. The workers take about 21 days to hatch, and these are pretty ready to hatch.
Yep.
I'd say. Very close to it. And I don't see, yeah, that's great. Like that's a really beautiful
It's good, doesn't it?
brood pattern.
Yep.
Like
Look at that comb. It's like
it's, yeah, just looking at that, you go, wow, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really good sign that these bees are doing really well. I'm going to pop that one back in.
they're on track again.
Yeah, they're on track again, and that's all we're really checking for, just to make sure that they haven't run into any other issues. And we've got a little bit of cross comb going on just here, which might be an interesting thing to see.
That's on that new frame, isn't it?
Yeah, they've kind of built out the honeycomb frame right in this corner, and it's almost sort of joining onto the next frame. So I'm just going to be really careful and kind of wedge that down. Yeah, they just braced it onto that next comb a little bit. And you can see that
yes.
kind of it's bulging out a lot there. So So this one I can tell is mostly brood because it's lighter than the honey frames, because honey is heavier than brood. So when I picked that up, I instantly knew that it was probably going to be just mostly brood.
Yeah, whereas this one is quite heavy.
Yeah, because that's mostly honey.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything on that side interesting? Because I have another queen cup on this side.
Oh, really?
Again, there's nothing in it. So if you see here, I don't know if you can see the queen cup.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yep. Like some ancient Egyptian tomb raider.
Mira, Nev would like to know, what do you do with the wax that you scrape off?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. In my own hives, I collect it all, and I'm planning to make some honeybee wraps out of my wax, so you can purify it down and use the wax to make candles surfboard wax. But yeah, I'm planning to make some honeybee wraps with my spare wax. But yeah, we'll put it in a little container with other cut like little scraps of wax and melt it down. So I'm just going to push that flat a little bit, just to discourage them from joining it onto that next frame so much. Because you need to be able to remove individual frames, because you need to be able to check for pests and diseases. And
how often do you think you should be like doing this, like check it? And would you check it more often because there was the problem with the queen?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really different depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, okay.
Like here in Byron Bay, it's, you know, these hives just thrive 10 months of the year, whereas I've been living in Berlin and it has a massive winter. So right now my hives are hibernating.
Yeah, okay.
And so in the spring I'm checking them really regularly, because I also have things like pests like varroa mite to deal with. But here, you know, a very thorough brood inspection a few times a year. But also, yes, if you notice that your hive went queenless, then you're wanting to check in and make sure that everything's back on track and they're healthy. And you can also tell a lot by observing from the outside.
Of what you beat, because like there's no brood on that one. Yeah?
There is actually, but it's not capped. Let me see if I can show you. Let's see if there's some on this side. Oh, there is as well. I was just looking to see if the queen was anywhere. So it doesn't look like there's brood, but if you look down the cells, can you see the grubs, the white little grubs?
And where it's like really shiny.
Well, the shiny is nectar, but can you see the grubs in there?
In the bottom of them.
Right in the bottom?
Yeah.
That's developing little bees, the little larvae.
So they just haven't capped it off?
Yeah, they haven't gone into the next phase yet. And you should maybe even be able to see some eggs next to them. But eggs are a little bit harder to see. Oh, I can see some on this side where she's laid.
And do they always leave that gap at the bottom of the brood frame so that
they
can sort of walk around?
Like, they tend to leave that gap. Yeah, the bees are pretty good at looking after themselves.
Yeah.
So, it might be.
I might just turn that
turn that. Here, I can do it, Trace. You're getting a bit of.
I'm having a bit of a smoker.
Just having a bit of a smoker in the face. How about we pop it over there?
Thanks, love.
Not so fun getting smoker in the face, is it? Now, do you want to do a frame? I can always take that frame off you. Let me do one more.
Okay.
So, my guess would be the queen's on here. But that could be very presumptuous. No. Well, I haven't seen her so far, and she usually hangs out in the middle because the design of the brood box, usually on the outer edges you have honey, and then you have pollen stores, and then in the center is where you have the brood.
Oh, okay. So that's why she's there, hanging around.
But I don't see her, and I haven't seen her yet. Just going to turn that around, Stone. Have a little squeeze on this side. Spot the queen.
Spot the queen.
So I don't need to see the queen, because on the last frame I saw eggs. So, and I can see eggs on this frame as well, which will be very hard to see on the. So in this section here, they're like little tiny grains of rice at the bottom of the cell. Very actually hard to see on the camera, but so because I see the eggs, I know that there's a queen laying, because within the last 3 days there's been a queen laying. And you know, we've seen capped brood, we've seen larvae, we've seen eggs, so we're seeing brood in all stages.
Yep.
And that's just another sign that, you know, we have a healthy hive with a strong laying queen. And I take that off you. Then you might even want to do that next frame. Oh yeah, see, this is so much heavier.
Yeah.
Mira Jade's asking if you've seen sunken brood caps.
I haven't seen any sunken brood caps, but that is a good question, because it is important to check for signs of issues, and sunken brood caps can be one of those signs for potentially something like American foul brood. Also looking down into the cells to make sure there's no chalk brood or any other signs of pest diseases. And again, if you find something that you're not sure about, you can always take a photo and show it to your mentor and get their advice. Now I'm just going to pop this frame down and lean it against the edge of the box. I actually have a frame holder on my hive in Berlin, so it just hooks on the side.
Nice. So this one's nice and light again, so obviously you can see the brood.
I'm going to smoke. See how we've got a few bees buzzing around us now? It's kind of like the bees' way of telling us that they're kind of having enough. They're like,
stop annoying me.
Stop annoying me, yeah, a little bit. So I'm just going to give them a little bit more smoke, just because they're starting to get a little bit annoyed. But again, this is a very gentle hive. I've worked with some hives that are so aggressive that you have to be completely suited and gloved, and they're bouncing off you constantly, stinging all through your gloves. So these bees are still in.
That's the awesome Jess paint job on the outside.
Yes, they're very happy with their lovely mansion. So I just saw a hive beetle. So one of the pests that we deal with here in Byron Bay is small hive beetle. And they're this little black beetle, and they lay their larvae kind of in the honey, and they can what we call slime out a whole hive, which is really quite disgusting. And I just saw one running around. You know, a healthy colony will do pretty well at defending themselves, but they do at certain times of year become quite problematic. So you can create oil traps or other sorts of traps in the bottom of your hive so that the small hive beetle fall through and get trapped and killed, because the bees actually can't kill the small hive beetle, but they can kind of herd them. Often they like make little traps out of propolis and herd them in there. It's really cute. So do you see a queen anywhere there?
This one is. Do you want to have a look? Because
sure. Do you want to tip it back up? Yep, that was it. Oh, no, yeah, that way.
And then what?
And then switch your hands around. Yeah, yeah, it's a bit confusing. So, because you don't want to tip, because it might break, because it's just about spinning it on the axis, and then you can tip it back that way. So you've got a bit of brood on this as well. There's some young bees. See if I can find you a young bee. There's a couple on this side. You can tell they're young bees because they're really furry. Let's see here. They're freshly hatched. They're like.
How old do you reckon? Like.
Oh, I don't know. They probably would have hatched today, maybe even.
Oh, goodness.
Like the ones that are super kind of furry and white. Actually, I saw one the other day come out of a cell, and it was almost looked a little bit wet. It was like so white and furry. So we still haven't seen our Miss Queenie, but I can see eggs here. So again, we've got more eggs. Watch out. If you grab this and tilt, you can kind of see little tiny grains in the bottom there. Just in these few cells here. If you just tilt it to the right light, can you see the little tiny grain?
Oh my goodness.
That looks like a mini grain of rice.
That is a baby bee.
That is a baby bee.
Oh, I think I can see their heart pumping.
So that is awesome. this hive's doing, like, this is exactly what I want to be seeing at this
Right.
stage, is lots of brood, some honey stores, some pollen stores. But while we're in here, let's check right across and look at the last two edge combs. And, you know, it's nice to find your queen, but it's not necessary, you know, because you've seen all the things that point to it being a healthy and... So this has got amazing pollen on it. Let me just double check.
And the little white bits on that
Little
one.
queen's not on this. Yeah, actually this bee is offloading its own pollen right now in the cell. This bee just here is offloading pollen off its back leg. It used a little spur on its middle leg to spur the pollen and knock it off the back of its pollen basket. So it's just climbing out, this little one here.
Wow.
So when bees collect nectar, they come back with nectar in their special honey stomach and they pass it to another bee who then processes it more before depositing it into a cell, and then they fan it to reduce it to turn it to honey. But with pollen, they collect it on their legs and they come back and they have to remove their own pollen and pack it into the cell.
Oh, which is what that little one
Was
just
what
doing.
she was just doing, which I've never seen before. I knew that they did it, but I actually saw her kind of like wriggling and shoving the pollen off the back of her leg, which one of, you know, we might, if we wait long enough, we might get another one. It's so cool. They do so many awesome, amazing things.
Isn't it?
Mira, what job is a bee given when it first hatches?
So when a bee first hatches, usually they're going to be a cleaner, I believe, and often I think that's actually clean their own cell that they hatch out of, and then they change. So that's the worker bees, so the girls, they change roles throughout their life, and they do nurse. So they nurse the young bees and feed them. And then, sorry, I'm getting distracted looking for a bee that's offloading pollen again, because that was so cool. But you can see probably that there's heaps of different coloured pollen all through that frame. How about you want to have a hold of that and have a closer look? Like there's heaps of different beautiful
really
orangey, and look, here's another bee here
and
with the
even
pollen
reddy.
on its legs. Yeah, you can get pollen in so many different colours. I've seen purple pollen and blue pollen, brown pollen,
Really? Does
white.
it depend on the bees, or is
So it just depends on the flower. So the different flowers, just like you have different nectars from the different flowers that give you different flavours of honey, you have the different pollens from the different flowers that give the different colours.
And do you, like in Berlin,
Yeah.
do your is your pollen a different colour than it is here because of the plants? Like
Yeah,
really different?
definitely, and depending what's in bloom, you know, the main nectar flow in Berlin in the summer is the linden tree, the lime tree, and it has a really bright yellow, almost like fluorescent yellow pollen. It's really, really cool.
Wow. And is your hive in the city of Berlin?
Yeah, it's actually, I've got 2 beehives on my balcony.
Oh, in Berlin.
In Berlin, yeah. So
That's so
and these cute little balcony hives, and at the moment they're all huddled down, wrapped up and basically hibernating for winter. They ball together around the queen, and so they eat their honey stores that they've kept to keep warm, and the bees come to the edge, the worker bees, and they use their muscle that they use to fan their wings to vibrate and heat. So they're little heater bees, and they come on the outside of the ball of bees. The queen's in the middle. Their main purpose is to keep her warm.
Yeah, okay.
And then the outer bees, you know, like wiggle, vibrate to keep warm, and then when they're tired they go in and the cycle out again. Just going to move this smoker. Don't all get completely, smoked out. So just be careful of that angle. I reckon we should pop that back in. Now, did I pass that to you and did we switch ends on that one?
This one comes from here.
Yeah, but did we switch it end to end? Let me have a look.
Oh.
So I'm
How
just,
can you tell?
well,
Because of where it
usually,
was.
yeah, you want to put them back in the same way as they came
Yes.
out, not switch them end to end, because there is that slight curve, but I'm looking at that frame and just making sure there's not a big bulge there, and I think
gotcha.
that's fine. I think
Yep.
we may have So just gently put that one back in. I mean, there are times where you will swap frames around, but generally the bees do their own, you know, they store their honey and pollen, and then most of the brood's in the centre.
And so do you like this is, you know, pretty full. Do you think like soon it'll be ready to super?
I think soon. I think
when would you think you should add the super to it?
I think I think a lot of that new brood's going to hatch really soon, and so I think the numbers are going to spike probably quite soon. But I think because I know that they were queenless just a month ago, they didn't have a queen, and so they had a real, like, quite a big break of being able to lay. And, you know, they have drawn out all the comb, you know, that's the edge frame.
Yeah.
But I would probably maybe check back in a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's like, they're looking pretty good, but you want kind of almost like so many bees.
More.
It's a few more bees so that it's almost like bursting with bees, because then you add the super and they have enough to kind of go up and service that space.
Yep.
So I'm just gently moving these frames back over to put this all back together. Any other questions?
Mark's asking if you ever collect the royal jelly.
I don't. I have never collected royal jelly, but there certainly are people that do collect royal jelly. So I'm just like wiggling these frames so I don't, you notice that I'm kind of just like gently kind of wiggling them back and forth to give the bees enough time to move out. There we go.
I think it's good too, like, because I do a bit of phone work here for Flow on the customer support, and quite a few people will say to me, oh, do I really need a bee suit, and do I really need a smoker? And I think because they think maybe you can put the flow in the garden and the bees and you don't have to do this. So I think it's really good, you know, for new beekeepers to see this, that I wouldn't want to be doing this without a suit and a smoker and gloves.
Absolutely not.
So much
I know, but I wore gloves for the first 2 years, just to make sure I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
It is, and it's like part of it, this is the important bit. Like, you have to get this brood box buzzing and healthy and happening before you have any chance of them producing excess honey.
Yeah.
You know, and at the end of the day, the honey's just a bonus. Like, this is the awesome bit, I think. So that one's mostly honey as well.
Yeah.
I think. Is there any brood on your side?
Really? That was the one with the little...
Yeah, so they haven't fully drawn out all this comb yet. So I would just leave them, maybe check in a week or 10 days. Oh, see those hive beetle down the bottom?
Oh, yes.
Squash them. So it's almost like they're herding them into that little gap.
Ah. You put a little bit of oil in there. And
Look at it.
Look, she's pushing it out.
Yeah. So do you want to squash that one on the end there? So, yeah, the bees kind of attack them and herd them, but they don't actually have the ability to kill them.
And so they'll drop through the mesh down there, and then if you had the oil trap, they just drown, do they, in the oil?
That they do. So if we put that one back on the edge.
Michelle's asking what brand are your suits?
Oh, these are actually our own Flow branded suits. So I'm wearing what's called is it a Flow?
Three-layered mesh.
Three-layered mesh. Yeah, you probably know better than me. A three-layered mesh jacket.
From $149.
Which is great because it allows a bit of airflow through there. So it's a really hot day today. I'm sweating even in this.
Yeah.
And Trace is wearing one of our organic cotton suits.
Which is pretty, it feels really comfortable. I feel really safe and protected.
Yeah, it's a really nice cover. So they're available on our website at honeyflow.com.
And Blythe would like to know where we are at the moment.
We are. That's a great question.
That beautiful view.
Yes. So I'm just popping this comb back in. We are just on a hillside up behind Byron Bay and Lennox Head in Australia, in New South Wales, Australia, which is where we have the Flow office. And our Flow team are all inside, busy answering your emails and creating new fun videos and all sorts of other wonderful things. So I'm just going to push stone. I'm just going to show you that in these boxes there's actually a little bit of space on either side. Like so this is a 8-frame Langstroth box, which fits a 6 flow frame when we do put the super on. And there is a little bit of extra space. Don't worry about that extra space. It actually makes it easier to move your frames around when you're doing an inspection, but usually what I'll do is I'll center them.
Right, and have the gap even.
Yeah, so I have the gap either side, and I make sure that through here all the frames are kind of up against each other, because that means that the bees will generally build straighter and not so much sort of crazy burr comb.
Yep.
But I've left a little bit more of a gap there because that one already had a little bulge on it, and I don't want to squash it because the bees need to be able to access every surface.
And Chuck says he's heard that some bees will chew the legs off beetles.
Oh wow, really? That's cool. I haven't heard that, Chuck. That doesn't surprise me. They're very industrious little creatures. They're pretty amazing, actually. So the rule is, can I give that to you?
Yep.
Be gentle and move slowly and calmly around bees, but you just saw me whack this. So that's a bit of a contradiction. But when you want to get bees off something, it's actually an easier way and a quicker, less disturbing way just to give one short, sharp jolt.
Yeah, okay.
And then they fall off rather than brushing them slowly and getting them really annoyed.
Yep.
But generally speaking, when you're in a beehive, you would have seen today we were moving very slowly and calmly, trying to listen to the bees. And
they're really calm. I mean,
they were
done
really
this with
good.
Some, and the bees, you can just like,
Yeah.
whoa.
So I'm just getting, that's just a bit of burr comb that I'm getting rid of again, just to clean that up and not have so much sticky honey mess when you open it next time. So I would check back maybe in a week or 10 days. And again, also it depends, like we don't have a strong nectar flow happening right now, but the bloodwood has just started flowering. So your choice to add the super is not only how bumper the brood is. It's like if it's coming into winter,
Yes.
you wouldn't add your super right now.
Yeah, okay.
Because we have a nectar flow that goes maybe for 9 or 10 months of the year. We're incredibly lucky here in Byron Bay. I would, you know, I'm not so familiar, so I'd ask Cedar, what's flowering at the moment, Cedar?
Okay,
What's
and then
likely to be
decide.
flowering next?
Yep.
Should I add a super
Yep.
and give them a chance to fill it? Probably I would say yes here,
Because if
but definitely not somewhere that was a cold climate.
because if you add it too early, what will happen? They just won't go up into the super.
Yeah, they won't go up. And also, like, the trick I think that I've learned is it's about giving, like, you're working with the bees, and it's about not giving them too much space, but giving them enough space. So you don't want to give them not enough because they might swarm,
Yep.
but you don't want to give them too much that they can't take care of it or defend it, because then hive beetle and other pests can move in,
Okay, yep.
and the colony
Gets a
can
bit weaker.
get weaker and not
Yeah.
survive. So it's like it's this constant kind of making sure that you're giving them what they need
Yeah.
to thrive, but not too much that it's too much for them to look after.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that maybe in a week that would be pretty close to
They get
to
the roof,
be ready for a super. Yeah, we can just pop the roof back on.
all the bees have gone.
Yep. Thanks, bees.
Yeah, you've done well.
And if there's any more questions, they can be put in the comments below, where our team will be answering them after this. And yeah, thanks, and
Yeah, thanks, Mira.
happy
That was
beekeeping.
great.
Good work, Chase.